I'm starting you off with this boring black screen right here because I have something to apologise for, since this was meant to go live yesterday, but unfortunately it just wasn't meant to be because my Wi-Fi got cut out. So naturally I was unable to upload this video, as well as the premiere, which of course preceded this upload by a few hours. So naturally they both had to be pushed back by a day. Of course this never would have happened had my Wi-Fi not cut out, so these delays were beyond my control, and I apologise that there was a lack of a Sky Timber upload yesterday because of it. But moving on to the video at hand, we are going to be ranking down all 12 variant series within the Skylanders franchise from worst to the first. Now that we've jumped back into live action, you can see before me upon my desk a setup of the characters that do and do not count towards the ranking right here, which coincidentally enough is a ranking of a dozen different Skylanders variant series, and that's nice because a dozen is of course the number known as 12, which is a really nice number to work with, so I appreciate that much. But moving on to the characters which would not count towards this ranking list of all things are the characters which aren't variant series, because get this, the title alluding to the fact that we're ranking variant series is a video ranking the variant series of Skylanders, so therefore variants with similar names but which ultimately aren't the same series don't count. Variants which have a name which is unique to them and a name which isn't shared with any other variants throughout the series are also not a series. And then even when we have variants that are of the exact same character, they also do not class as a series, since they have completely different themes, colour palettes and names to call their own. We have Punch Pop Fizz, Love Potion Fizzy Frenzy Pop Fizz and Birthday Bash Big Ball Pop Fizz. They could not be more different if they had tried. But we're going to move on to Love Potion Fizzy Frenzy Pop Fizz in more detail later on. For now, I want to talk to you guys about why the holiday variants do count towards the video even as a variant series in of themselves, because they are representing the same event. In this case, this is Halloween, and for every single case of the holiday variants, because they're all representing the same event, they all look in uniform, they all have the exact same colour palettes, because here's a problem with Power Punch and Punch, for two colour palettes are different enough to where they don't really look uniform and they don't look like a series, and they have different names despite them being similar, so that's what creates their sharp contrast with one another. But for the holiday series, you can't say the same, and that's really what makes them a series. So despite the fact that they do have different names, unlike the two mystical characters right here, they still belong as part of the same series, representing the same event as one another. But speaking of the mystics right here, these do count towards a variant series because, first of all, there is more than one with the same name. They are both mystic characters, and it doesn't even matter that they come from the same game. So, just to reiterate, a series is a series of variants with the same name, and they count as a series so long as there is more than one, and it doesn't even matter if they come from the same game or not. And they also class if they also class as a series even if they represent the same holiday, like the Halloween variants at hand. But now moving back to Love Potion Fizzy Frenzy Pop Fizz right here, no doubt that raises the question, well, he is a holiday variant because he's based on the event Valentine's Day, so why does he not count towards the list? There are other Valentine's variants after all. Well, not in-game ones. Whilst there are characters like Red Camo and Red Dunebug which represent that of Halloween, chase variants like Golden Snowflock Prison Break right here, despite their gloriousness, do not count towards the list. This is ranking in-game based variants only. So unfortunately, Love Potion Fizzy Frenzy Pop Fizz is the only in-game Valentine's variant to exist within the entirety of the franchise. So therefore, with it only being one and not exceeding that number, it cannot count towards the list as a series of all things. Now, it would have counted had the Heartbreaker Bookshot not been cancelled, but unfortunately we are in the universe where it was, so the Valentine's series is non-existent. But now we move back to this boring dark screen just so I can tell you, of all things, that we're going to get into ranking the list as soon as the intro has played itself out. So without further ado, let's get into the video at hand. As soon as I came up with the idea of this video, I knew exactly which variant series was going to be scraping at the bottom of the barrel in this here ranking video, so coming in at last place without a shot of a doubt is the Steelplate series. What were they thinking when they created Steelplated Smash Hit, and what were they thinking still when they brought it back for Imaginators in the form of Steelplated Tootsicle? Honestly, I feel like how these characters got commissioned is that some developer had their kid colour in a colouring book with the, of course, characters at hand, and then their kid must have picked up the ugliest shade of green, just scribbled all over it, and then the developer pitched for variant to the, of course, main executives of the game, drunk, and in this drunken state they must have obviously approved this variant, because no one in their right mind would approve of such an ugly shade of green. That's why I say the kid must have found the ugliest green crayon in for their colouring books here, because this green is beyond disgusting. It looks horrible. It has no contrast with the silver at hand. You know, I can understand the silver side of it because of the steel, but still, this could have been a really great variant, because the greens and the silvers could have had a nice contrast. It just so happens that they chose the worst shade of green possible, to where the variant looks more disgusting than anything. Why did they bring it back for Tootsicle? Why? I will never understand that. What an ugly variant, to say the least. Coming in at number 11, I have a variant series that I don't really have any problems with, but at the same time it doesn't do anything extraordinary with its setup. It's simply just golden characters, golden plated characters more specifically, with a white checkerboard. You know, that definitely conveys the meaning of speed in their characters, but for one of the characters, it feels like it's out of uniform with the rest of the theming of the variant's name, because Crypt King has nothing to do with speed, so why is he here with a Nitro variant? Headrush charges, and then, of course, Freeze Blade and Magna Charge have the speed skill in common, so all of the other Nitro variants make sense and fit the theming, unlike Crypt King. So the fact that he didn't really apply this variant theming to the best characters possible to truly, you know, add to their design. In fact, if anything, Nitro Crypt King takes away from it, because it doesn't have the contrast in golds and blacks of the original variant. It's just what makes this variant more disappointing to me. That, and also the colours are a little bit blocky. You know, all what you have is solid gold with whites thrown in here and there to create some minor contrast. So overall, the variants don't look as nice as other variants do. There's a lack of consistency within their theming. They don't really add anything to their original designs, with the exception of Nitro Magna Charge, who is obviously the best of the crowd. But yeah, no problems with it really. I just wish that they applied the variant to more fitting characters, aka not Crypt King right here, and they had more sharper contrast than just gold and white. Kicking off our top 10 is the Gnarly series. Now, if this has such a unique blend of colours that so sharply contrast one another, to where I wish this variant spread to other characters rather than just the Treerex-based characters, because it looks so good. The shade of blue, unlike with the problem with Steelplate Tootsicle, is so nice to look at, because A, it's a unique shade, and B, it just doesn't look ugly. It creates such nice contrast with the blacks and the yellows, and it just genuinely adds a lot to the original design and makes it look so much cooler because of it. But as I said earlier, it is only unique to these two characters, so because they weren't really truly able to fully expand with this series, it lost a lot of its potential, not spread into other Skylanders, and it's a shame the developers didn't see that potential and, you know, as I alluded to earlier, spread it amongst other characters within the cast, mind you. That, and also the blue is a little too dark. It kind of blends in with the black rather than contrasting it. It's really the yellows that come in to even out the design. But without the yellow, and the colour was just and the colours were just block blue and block black, this variant series would have been swapped around with a Nitro series, that's for sure. But because it is just that slightly bit nicer looking than the Nitro series and a lot more unique in terms of the colours expressed, is what gives the Gnarly series that slight edge over the Nitros, you could say. Coming in at number 9, we have the Christmas Chase variants. Now, I love how uniform these look. They all come under the same theme, and which is glorious to see. And the colours specifically chosen are very well thought through because, of course, we have reds, greens, and whites, which are all of the traditional-based colours for Christmas, as well as candy on the first two variants, since of course it's traditional for kids to receive candy and things like stockings to start off their days with. It's for one day of the year where you can have candy for breakfast, is what my parents would always say. But moving on to my main problem with these variants is that the reds and the whites don't really have that much of a contrast, and especially in the later variants, they look rather blocky and boring. So naturally, it's the look of the variants that I don't like as much as others because they aren't as contrasting and they're just rather blocky. Like if you take Dive-Clops here, look at how much red he has and lack of contrast, especially in his back right here. The entirety of his back is red and nothing else, creating a very, undistinguishing, blocky type colour palette to it. So naturally, that's where my main gripes with the Christmas variants begin and end. So naturally, it's a very in-theme looking series. It's just a shame that the colours don't contrast each other as nicely as they could have. Highlight here is definitely Jolly Bumbleblast, since he has the most colours to work with, and because of that he definitely looks visually the most striking. But after him they just went on a big downward spiral. Coming in at number 8, we have the Enchanted series. Just like Finale series, it's a series which I wish extended past the Skylanders Swap Force cast, because the colours here are so contrasting and so awesome to look at to create some very visually striking characters. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself with that pun. It was just staring me in the face. But as we move on, what I don't like about this is the lack of consistency between the figurine and the in-game counterparts, because in-game these figurines look a lot more blue than they do on the figurines, and that's just a little bit disturbing for me. I prefer accurate translations between the variants and the in-game Skylanders. So that just feels very unpolished to me, and I would have preferred that shade of blue being on the figurine as well, because that way they would have felt more unique and more distinguishing in comparison to the dark variants. Because as it stands, the whites and the blacks, whilst having a nice contrast and looking very nice in contrast to one another, just don't really distinguish themselves all that well from the dark variants. In fact, if I didn't tell you guys anything, you would just assume that these are dark variants because the whites and the blacks resemble the silvers and the blacks so heavily. So really it's lack of distinction here and the lack of proper translation that really draws these figures down for me, and they just want to be dark variants in my personal opinion. But they still have that sharp contrast which the dark variants are so well known for, and it does still make them stand out amongst the crowd. And the designs that they picked out are, perfectly expanded upon with this colour palette right here. Star Strike and Hoot Loop are perfect choices for the colour palette at hand. So once again, it's definitely well thought through. It's just a shame my minor nitpicks with this variant series. Coming in at number 7 is a surprisingly very well thought through variant series that was introduced in the most recent iteration of the franchise, Imaginators. So the fact that for the very last game, a game notorious for laziness, they had such a well thought through variant series introduced is quite a strange coincidence, if anything at all. So when it comes down to these variants, what I find so clever about them is the fact that they are inverted iterations of one another. So if you look at the colour palette of the Tycoon Crow and then the colour palette of the Bad Juju, you'll notice the Tycoon Crow has very little silver, whereas with the Bad Juju it's all over her, and then the Tycoon Crow has a lot of black and red, whereas the Mystic Bad Juju has a lot less of those colours. So that's why I say they are effectively inversions of one another, and because of that they look really in uniform and really nice next to one another, because the reds, the blacks and the silvers are really contrasting, as they should be. It kind of combines the best of several different series, including the Legendary series and the Dark series. So above all, that sharp contrast, whilst not being very distinctive due to the colour palettes being very similar to that of other variant designs, is what makes this such a 50-50 based series with me. On one hand, I like certain elements of it, and then other elements not so much, and I like the fact that I use the word elements when, of course, these are two very different elements, the fire and the air. So once again, pun intended, 100% laugh at my jokes. Next up, we have the Power Blue variant series, which is a series that I really wish extended past Superchargers, because whilst the colours themselves aren't all that contrasting and don't really stand out on the shelves because the blue's a little too light with the white, and so naturally because of that the two blend together, so a darker blue definitely would have suited the colour palette a whole lot more to create a sharper contrast. But outside of the colour palette chosen, what I love about this variant series is what it stands for, and that's why I wish it would have returned, because it stands for charity. All of the profit from these figurines went to a charity. I can't remember its name, but you guys will see it in the edit below. And that's just such powerful marketing. To, be showcasing to the world that Skylanders can be sold for sake of charity rather than just greedy business owners aiming for profits is incredible, and it gave me more incentivization to actually grab these characters. Unfortunately, I never managed to get any of them in retail. I had to get them pre-owned, but still, because I had to get them pre-owned, it means people did buy them in retail before me, and that money of theirs went to those charities. So that just conveys a really powerful message, and it's really the colours themselves. They really fit the theming of charity, the more lighter colours. It just mentally makes you feel relaxed and calm, because that's exactly the kind of emotional response you have to these colours. So it just goes to show that the colour palette was really thought out and conveys a powerful message, and above all, whilst there is a lack of sharp, distinctive colours within this variant series, it's just so memorable for all the right reasons and so heartwarming. So for those reasons alone, it comes in halfway through the list at number 6 right here. Coming in at number 5, we have the Halloween series. Now, the Halloween series was always limited to variants only, which always had a black and orange type contrast, since they were very traditional based Halloween colours, since, of course, orange is for colour of pumpkins, and then black is, for colour of the night sky, and traditionally, even, monsters, ghouls, and, of course, trick-or-treating occur at night. So, everything that Halloween is traditionally known for is known to occur at night time. So for dark in their colour palettes, or for blacks you could even say, as well as for dark, is what makes these so well themed and so well thought through to create not only a contrast between those oranges and those blacks, even, I don't know what I was about to say, purple right then, but case in point, that contrast is really cool to see, as I alluded to open up with. And for specific shades used, like the shade of green on Chopscotch's hair, first of all, it's not as ugly as that of the steel-plated variants, but second of all, it's a candy-based colour, because you get a lot of candies and sweets that are of that green colorization, especially when it's apple or sour-based sweets. So naturally, these variants kind of look like candy in a way, and since that's traditionally what, you give away for free during for hours of trick-or-treating, once again just makes these variants so in uniform with the themes of Halloween and what they're trying to represent here, and they're a perfect, of course, expansion upon those chase variants that started off this colour palette trend, because they translate from the in-game figurine, or the figurine even, to the in-game colour palette, which creates a very nice contrast, to be saying the least. Coming in at number 4 is for Legendary series. Now, when you say Skylanders variant, the Legendary characters are no doubt the first thing that would come to mind, since it's such an iconic line of variants, due to the blacks and the gold looking exactly what the name would imply. Legendary, because of course gold is established with rich pureness, and then the blacks create that really sharp contrast to make the variants look memorable and distinctive. But unfortunately, there is one main issue that is really harming for the Legendary lineup. The reason why it's not number 1, despite the fact that it would be deserving of it, is because of those Imaginators in the back right now. Yeah, no doubt you saw them previously, because they stick out like an absolute sore fist. I mean, thumb, but that's Juggernaut getting in the way of the camera right there. Yes, Demigod, I am not going to let you off the hook for that one. But as I digress, everyone's favourite phrase that I seem to have to need to use every single video. Man, that's a mouthful. These characters, as you can tell, are red and gold, rather than the traditional black and golden colours that the Legendary series is known for. Why did the developers do this? Why did they all of a sudden change up the colour palette of variants altogether? Sure, red and gold look nice, but that doesn't mean that they have to be Legendary variants. They could have still been red and gold, but have been called an entire new variant altogether. They didn't have to be legendaries, and yet because of those two, they create an uneven uniform amongst the cast. They don't look like they go together because of just how contrasting the reds and the golds are to everything else, mind you. And that means that the legendaries really weren't left off on a high note, because Imaginators is the most recent Skylanders game, and so having such terrible additions to the lineup as the final iterations of the series is just ultimately a huge disappointment. And because of the lack of consistency amongst this cast right here, it's just what makes the Legendary series not as legendary as it could have been. Developers, why did you do this? I will never forgive you, and that's why the Legendary series isn't even getting a bronze medal in this here ranking video. At number 3, receiving our bronze medal is my favourite of the holiday-based series, and that's going to be the Easter series, because, man, first of all, these characters look really in uniform. They all utilise the exact same colours, so naturally they all look really nice together to really display a powerful unit, mind you, with really, really nice contrasting colours. You have blues, greens, whites and pinks, all used in combination with one another to make for a very distinctive, very unique looking contrast of colours that you don't see in any other variant series, so naturally that makes them stand out for all the right reasons. And on top of that, they utilise these specific colours because they are associated with Easter, of course. Easter eggs are traditionally wrapped in pink, green, blue, white type eggs with patterns all over them, and that's exactly where the dive bomber comes in. If you look at the dive bomber, it has different patterns and everything to disguise it exactly like an Easter egg. So above all, the theming and the colours of this series are not only in uniform with one another and create a sharp contrast, but they also emphasize the themes and representation of the holiday, which they are, well, representing, mind you. So that's what makes the Easter variants so strong, so contrasting, and so awesome to look at, especially when they are together as a unit, unlike the Legendary series where you put them all together and all of a sudden you're highly distracted by the red and golds found within the senseis of the series, you could say. Coming in at number 2, receiving our silver medal, coincidentally enough, because it's no doubt the second most iconic variant series within the Skylanders lineup, and of course for one possessing a lot of silver within its colour palette. So that is what we call Seption, and that's a lot of Seption. That's why I better stop there before I wind up dooming the current Soul Link on the channel. But moving on to what makes the Dark series so memorable is the fact that they are featured in so many starter packs. In fact, Superchargers of which had 3 Dark starter packs, which sure, that was a lot of money, but it was also very, very memorable, well, because of the amount of money we spent on them all. But in the end, it turned out worth it, because every single character which they chose for the Dark series was justified and thought through thoroughly, because their specific colours combined with their specific design created a sharp contrast, making them all look in uniform and look glorious with one another. Like, seriously, this is one of the greatest looking lineups of the lot, much more so than the Legendary series, because, you know, the developers didn't toy around with the colour palette for the Imaginators this time around and actually kept them with the iconic black and silver based colour palettes. And above all, they are called dark variants for reasons. The fact that they look so dark and so contrasting because of it keeps them within their own theming and just adds to that uniform aesthetic, as I was saying earlier. So above all, I'm glad they chose out the characters that they did for this series. It was iconic to the extent to where they gave brand new additions of a starter pack dedicated to these variants, and these variants alone from Swap Force onwards. And that just made them really seeked out for, especially since the Dark Starter packs were limited editions and were only ever released on launch. After that, you could never get them in retailers ever again, so you had to resort to pre-owned online websites like eBay and all of that. And all of this started with a single Dark Spyro that was put in the 3DS starter pack to make it look more attractive and, you know, garner those extra 3DS sales money, because who wouldn't want a Spyro looking as awesome as that with his black and silvers really contrasting each other to really expand upon that original Spyro design in really awesome ways. And so naturally, from there, the Dark series grew and grew into the powerful unit it is today, looking as glorious as it does, giving it a well-earned silver place medal. Believe me, it wasn't just for perception, guys. There was more thought to put into it than that. Similar to that of the entirety of the Dark Design variant series, you could say, and man, that's a bit of a mouthful. But without a doubt, my number one favourite variant series, and one that has ultimately left me the most disappointed of all of them, is the Jade variant series, and there is only one reason why I'm disappointed with this variant series: because it's so damn cool and they never reintroduced it after Swap Force. Why are they reintroducing more blocky based colour palettes like the Nitro variants when they could have instead been bringing back the Jade series, which still has the gold, so it still has the richness of the Nitro series, and then it also has the greatest shade of green I've ever seen, a rather Jade looking green, so it really fits into the theming of its own name. And then you also have the whites on top of that to create one of the nicest blends of colours I have ever seen. The gold, the green and the white just work so well together, and it gives them this crystalline jewel type look, which really matches for the designs that they utilised. Because of course you have Jade Flashwing, who's made of crystals, so giving her that more crystalline type design was really fitting of the character. And then Jade Firecracker is of course based off a fire parade costume from the Chinese New Year, so naturally a more crystalline Jade looking type iteration of that was also justified, and it also looks just as glorious as the Jade Flashwing does. Why? When you have a variant series as awesome as this, do you not bring it back for later iterations? It disappoints me because it's just so unique looking. There is no greater blend of colours than these ones you see before you, as I said, to open up this very point with. And my point still stands. This is the greatest looking variant series. It's the greatest exploration of theming throughout any variant series because they fit the designs that they were picked out for so well. And that makes the Jade variant series, without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite variant series of the whole lot. What better way to end off this video than with a grand wide shot of all of the variants that were included in this ranking video, mind you. So yes, in uniform they do look quite glorious to say the least, and I'm glad that I was able to set up such a large shot, although to be perfectly honest it took me far too long to dish out all of these Skylanders from my shelf over there, because as you can tell it's a little bit scattered and a bit of a mess. But as I digress, this video is indeed coming to an end. I sure hope you enjoyed this rendition of Sky Timber, and I will be seeing you guys tomorrow for another video based around this event even. So until that moment arises, peace, and thank you so much as always for watching. But man, I still cannot get over how glorious this looks.